And thanks for joining us today for navigating the virtual interview. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Oops, let's just do one. All right, so we're talking about navigating the virtual interview. Feel free to save all the questions at the end because we will ask for questions in the chat at the end. But if you have a burning question, feel free to put it in the chat as I go. We do have my co-host Sandy Oman from Career Services helping with that. And so let me make sure, hold on. I want y'all to be able to see me. That's okay. So as I go, I'll probably just adjust that, but it is a Zoom call, so remember to keep yourself muted. You can turn your camera off. It does help the connection. And let's get started. So if you have heard of a virtual interview before, it's typically web-based. It's video-based as well. Web-based meaning that, as we've probably heard, it is over Zoom or FaceTime or other third-party vendors such as GoToMeeting. Now with all these, I do encourage you to download these programs beforehand if you don't already have it, of course, and practice with those programs. One thing that you'll hear me mention throughout the presentation is that I call people, including like my mom, my fiance, the day before, the day of, just to make sure everything is sounding good, looking good, and we'll go more into those details here momentarily. So when I talk about how it is video based as well, sometimes it's not live with another person. There is something called digital interviewing that if you are in the first steps of an interview or application process, you may see that it is a digital interview. And a digital interview is maybe what you've heard of where an applicant gets a link, and in that link, they have a series of questions, maybe 10 questions, one at a time, where you have maybe 3 chances to answer said interview question by recording yourself. So you'd prepare by, looking good, delivering a good response. And if you don't like the first try, you could give it a second try, but that previous try is deleted. So some people like this, some people don't. It can be less intimidating because it's not with a live person that you see. However, some people don't like that even though they get to try again, their previous try is deleted. So you want to make sure that you take your time with this, stay on top of it. I think it's easy to procrastinate with these digital interviews, but we're going to be talking more about the video interview virtually today. So it is an interview at the end of the day, and really we should be approaching a virtual video interview just like any other interview. So some interview refreshers can include ensuring you use clear and concise answers. And what I mean by that, it's not just about the length of the answer, but also being comprehensive. I think that's really important in how you shape your response so that you're giving all the necessary information. Now, with that being said, you will want to use examples to tell your stories, but don't necessarily recite a novel. That's why there are techniques out there where they are called, the STAR method, the SBO method. Those are acronyms that you can check out mainly on our website, which the link is there. If you simply go to our website, you click resources, then on the left, you can click interviewing. That can really be a summation of a lot we talk about today and more, but it includes the method that really helps you in keeping your responses structured, especially the long ones that are situational. Now, that last point, being aware of your virtual presence, is more holistic. It's really more about how the interviewer perceives you within that video/virtual interview. And that's why mock interviewing is so important. It can increase your confidence during the actual interview. And when you do a mock interview, hopefully you're starting with practicing in front of a mirror or with family, friends, other colleagues, maybe previous supervisors or professors, you name it. Even if that practice with that person is 5 to 10 minutes, it's better than nothing, which a lot of people don't practice interviewing at all. And I think that's one of the worst things you could do for your career development is not practice. So certainly schedule a mock interview with your program manager through Handshake. If you haven't done that before, when you're on Handshake, just click Career Center appointments, and you'll even see the selection of types of appointments you can schedule with your program manager, including mock interview. Now, virtual interviewing is really more about technology. I think there's a lot of a focus there, but some other success tips outside of technology you can see below. And I know I don't necessarily need to read them all out to you with the points, but just to touch on some of the highlights is that you want to, again, make sure your equipment is working correctly. This is where I really want to show what I got as far as a kit, if you will, of what I bring to the table when it comes to virtual interviewing. You want to make sure your microphone works. You want to make sure your speakers work. I always, again, make sure that I show myself and maybe another caller, that everything works. That's why I practice with my mom or someone before. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard where someone logs in 20 minutes before the interview and they feel it is enough time, but they start, getting into the program, let's say it's Zoom, and they haven't been on it for a while, and it starts updating. This actually happened to me when I first started interviewing for different careers. It happened to me with Skype. I hadn't used Skype in a while, and luckily I got on like 30 minutes before, and it updated, and it finished updating in like 5 or 10 minutes before the interview started. So I was a little disheveled, but I did get it done. But that was a little scary. I definitely don't want to play the odds with that again, and I encourage you to make sure all that is updated and downloaded the day before at least. Now you will want to also consider your surroundings. I'm in the most well-lit space of my house. I'm in front of my biggest window, so that's something to consider. That's what I always do for presentations like this, but it's the same thing for virtual interviews. You also want to make sure that it's a clean area. That certainly helps you psychologically and that there's no distractions for yourself. You can even see the background behind me is professional. There's no distractions, and professional being there's no lewd posters and no one passing behind me. I'm also in a very quiet space. There's no one here, etc. Now, you want to make sure that whether it's people or pets, they're not running around either. And any electronic equipment, including your phone, should be off. I don't know if you've ever gotten an Amber Alert, but even if your phone's on complete silent mode, it will go so loud if there's an Amber Alert. That's happened to me plenty of times. It's happened to a lot of people, and I've heard those stories. Don't be that person. Just turn off your phone unless you need it. And that's an important thing. It's good to have your phone as a backup plan. So it's good to have it nearby, but just don't have it on realistically. Now, you also want to dress for success. You can see that, and speaking of phone, I do have mine, close by, like I said. I'm not necessarily wearing a blazer, but I am dressed up. And you would want to dress up for a virtual interview just like you would any other interview. And that includes bottoms as well. There have been so many times that I'm like, oh, let me get my charger, and then you can see my bottoms. You want to be really careful of that. I hear so many people saying, oh, but I just wore PJs, I just wore gym shorts or something a little less. Definitely don't be that person. You'd be surprised how much the interviewer, how much the person on the other side of the camera can see, especially when you fidget or you didn't plan on getting something behind the computer and then they see your bottom. So be really careful of that. I wouldn't say it if it didn't happen a lot, and it can be quite embarrassing. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So to prepare for the interview, we want to prepare, like I said, as if it was a face-to-face interview. And that takes practice, more practice, and even more practice after that. But when it is face-to-face, you would bring things, hopefully, like documents, such as the position description. And hopefully with the position description, you have notes and highlights. I even like circled things that I want to ask questions about. You have a notepad, which I'll show you mine here in a second. I typically have a notepad with me, questions written down. I have 2 pens just in case one doesn't work. I'm able to jot down any names, any other notes I want to ask for later or remember for after, you name it. That's why I got the notepad there. I also have my resume typically on the side with, again, highlights, notes of things I want to bring up, things I want to highlight, and that can be accomplishments, skill reminders, and more. If you think of other things that you want to have at your disposal, please definitely do what you need to. Now let's take it a little further. You don't have to overthink preparing for a virtual interview. I think sometimes it can be a little intimidating, but realistically, again, prepare like it's any other interview. And that takes seriousness, but try to have all the focus be on the technological considerations. And with that being said, that's why I always have a battery source. I always keep it next to me, even if it's, even if my device is fully charged. I've been in interviews that go really long and I end up needing a plug-in. So I'm able to just plug it in quickly because I have it right next to me. You also want to keep your phone available, like I said, and I also bring headphones. Right now, I'm not using headphones, but certainly for interviews, I always use my headphones because I know that the noise quality is a lot better with my headphones. There's way less echo. There's zero chance of echo in my experience. So at least have them available. I automatically use them in interviews and other important calls, but at least have it available because your end of volume and sound quality could be great. But if the interviewer is asking, hey, it's really echoey on my end, you have an alternative source. Again, you have headphones. And in general with technology, as awesome technology is and as accessible it makes presentations and virtual interviews, we really need to be patient with the joys of it. And what I mean by that is during a virtual interview, be ready. Don't think that it may happen. It will happen. Be ready to ask the interviewer, could you repeat yourself? And they'll ask you the same thing, or to speak a little louder, other accommodations like that. I've dealt with it myself. I know so many people that have had crazy stories of the things they've had to do. I've even had to ask an interviewer, like it was a panel interview over video, and I had to ask them, please scoot in. I'd love to see you talk as much as hear you talk. So be ready for that. Now let's take it to the pro level of some pro tips that we've even gotten from employers' observations as well. One thing that surprises interviewees, such as our students and alum, is that looking someone in the eye on the other side of an interview. So if you want to look the interviewer in the eye, it's looking at the camera, not the screen, okay? And I think this is a really just tough habit to break. And all I can ask is to just be aware of where you're looking. And at the very least, look at the camera while you're responding. I think that's way easier of a task at first when you're creating this habit. Also, how's your Wi-Fi connection? Make sure that connection is strong and not patchy, not intermittent before you enter into an important call. I really like to encourage students and alum, if they're on campus, that when we're all back together, that our career services office does host students and alum for interviews in our interview rooms in our offices that you can call and reserve. Again, that'll be more so for when we're together and hosting more students in person, but keep that in mind if you ever need a quiet space with a good connection. We have phones and computers in there. So just wanted to plug that, and it's all free for you as a student or alum. Now, finally, I talked about bringing a notepad, but use that notepad as a cheat sheet. On my notepad, I always have space that I can write notes, write questions that I ask at the end, but I also prepare questions typically at the bottom. for the interviewer that I think of beforehand. And this is a cheat sheet because a lot of the time in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the interview, you forget the awesome questions you had, especially because so much can be thrown at you in the interview itself, even if it's just a short one, such as 20 or 30 minutes. It's one of the greatest benefits of an interview that you can bring to the table is a notepad, and especially for one in your own space. It can be intimidating and an adrenaline rush, so use all the tools available to you, whether it's a notepad or anything else that may help. Now, my final words of wisdom, and let's take it a little holistic here. Certainly be mindful of your facial expressions. I think that's one of the biggest embarrassing facts that people share is that they're embarrassed to practice because they don't like noticing their facial expressions. But it's so important, and that's why we encourage practicing in a mirror, for instance, or to video yourself to start off. It'll enable you to see even the smallest expressions that you do, and you'll be therefore able to assess how the interview may perceive them. And then be mindful of body language on that same vein. Body language really does comprise most of the perceived human interaction. And that's a lot of the time subconscious, but we need to be aware of it. So be intentional with your body language, especially as it shows on the screen. And that could certainly mean your orientation. You don't necessarily want to be turned to the side and answering a question. It looks a little awkward. And you also don't want to be leaning too far forward or too far back. That also will affect the volume. So keep that in mind. You want a good square position, just like I am right here. I feel like this is ideal, but also do what you're comfortable with. Maybe even mirror what the interviewer is doing. If they're pretty rigid and staying in this spot the whole time, awesome. But if they're a little less formal, I think that's okay too. You really should be looking to the interviewer because they are setting the tone, and feel free to match it professionally and respectfully. So as we start to finish up, pretty much right now, or really in 10 minutes, you'll be able to register for this practice interview day. It's really the best next step that you can do for your interview development. You can see that it is October 1st. There's certain slots that you can sign up for, and you get first dibs at it. You know, we're not really advertising when it's open except to you. And again, that's in 10 minutes. So after the presentation's over, feel free to go register for that. Also, you'll see our Industry Career Expo is Tuesday, October 13th from 11 to 5. It's a little different this semester because it's all online. Again, that's all virtual as an Industry Career Expo, and it's through Handshake. So if building your Handshake profile and using Handshake wasn't already important enough, it's certainly important now more than ever. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to Career Services, and we'll tell you more about how you can reach out to us in a later slide. Also, if this applies to you, there's a virtual graduate school fair. I think it's one of the best times with the economy to think about doing graduate school. We have some awesome grad school programs from all around the world signed up for this, and that's Wednesday, October 21st from 4 to 7, again, online through Handshake. So make sure you check that out, or maybe you know someone that's interested in grad school. Please share that with them. And I keep talking about Handshake. If you haven't really visited it before, that's okay. Make sure you access it through Ernie. You go to the tools. If it's not already on your home page, you click on that gear icon where the tools are. You will see Handshake. It's in alphabetical order, and you'll see that it's a yellow icon as you see there. And make sure you click that checkbox and save the changes so that it appears on your home page on Ernie from now on, so that it's easier to navigate to later on. Make sure you check out Eagle Elevate as well. There's a lot of competencies that you see here that employers, based on research, are looking for. And you can even get accomplished in them in a very formal way throughout our badging program. These are also badges that you can share virtually on LinkedIn, Handshake, other social media, even on your resume as you're applying for opportunities. So check that out. And if you have any questions, contact Ms. Christine Miller. That's her contact information there. And finally, our gold sponsor for the Industry Career Expo is Collins Aerospace. Collins Aerospace is a unit of Raytheon Technologies Corporation. It's a leader in technologically advanced and intelligent solutions for the global aerospace and defense industry. Created in 2018 by bringing together UTC Aerospace Systems and Rockwell Collins, Collins Aerospace has the capabilities, comprehensive portfolio, and expertise to solve customers' toughest challenges and to meet the demands of a rapidly evolving global market. Please visit jobs.collinsaerospace.com to learn more about open opportunities. And finally, to stay connected with us, there's really not an excuse to not be connected with us. It seems like we're everywhere, especially social media. I think Instagram is going to be our biggest plug right now. One of the newer things that we're doing is that we have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that. We have, recorded presentations such as this one we post, or other smaller ones that if you're not able to attend it, that's where we're going to post it. Or we share clips of it in other social media platforms. So check those out. If you have questions for us or wanted updates about events, we send emails as well, but Instagram is probably going to be a favorite amongst our student body. Now, do you have any questions? Please type them in the chat below and I will tackle them.
Hey Ryan, this is Sandy.
Hello.
I've also included in the chat room for everybody to see the instructions on how to sign up for an interview time, since that opens in 7 minutes. So because I am sending an email out about this sign up opportunity, but that won't be until 2:30. So that gives you attending the presentation the opportunity to sign up for a spot first. So just follow those. You can copy it if you want to and paste it into something and go back and visit it when we're done today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Sure.
Now in the chat, there was a question about the STAR method versus the SBO method. The STAR method it stands for situation, task, action, result. And that's how you'd break down your response. And SBO stands for situation, behavior, outcome. How I typically describe it, one versus the other, is that the SBO, situation, behavior, outcome, is typically considered a more broken down version of the STAR method. I think you may hear about the STAR method more in general. For instance, big companies like Boeing, for instance, they use the STAR method. They hope you answer behavioral interview questions, aka situational questions, in the STAR method. They even have STAR in their notes broken down for when they're taking notes on your response when they're interviewing you. So again, you may hear about the STAR method. I think sometimes it's important and easier to start with the SBO method because it's a little bit more simplified, and then transition to the STAR method. If you have further questions about that, feel free to type them in the chat below. But also you can set up an appointment with your program manager to even follow up this presentation, let alone to ask more about the STAR method, because it does take practice. You can read more about it on our website, but it's one of the more common challenges and common questions we get with interviewing in general.
Hey Ryan, is there more information they can find out about Interviewing 101?
Interviewing 101. Yes, so that's actually one of the presentations that we posted onto YouTube. So we're talking about virtual interviewing today, but if you wanted more of a refresher on interviewing in general, especially the interview basics, if you will, we did record a presentation on that, and it is posted to YouTube. So don't forget to check that out and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would help us tremendously. Alrighty, so I'm reading another question in the chat. How do you cater to an American audience interviewer? I've noticed there's typically a lot of filler conversations not specific to the interview. So I think this is more of a question towards the different cultures that may exist, especially in our industry, and how they really start to emerge in the initial conversations, let alone the beginning of an interview and throughout the interview. You mentioned in the question filler conversation. Yes, I think that maybe is a part of Western culture is I would call them pleasantries. For instance, the asking, "Oh, how are you?" "Oh, I'm good." Even if I'm like having a bad day, I'll probably say, "Oh, I'm good," just as a common hello, a common greeting before we really dig deep into the real purpose of the conversation, which is the interview, asking questions about your candidacy, etc. I think if you're not used to that, maybe practice doing it with friends, more specifically people of a more Western culture, since that is normal to them. You can see what questions they ask or what responses you should give them for some of those pleasantries, or vice versa. Beyond that, though, I would say interviews typically get right down to business. I mean, if the if the interviewer makes conversation with you, certainly roll with it. The interviewer as a whole is going to really call the shots and conduct the interview how they want. So if they keep asking you informal, maybe sort of personal questions, roll with it as comfortably as you want. But typically, maybe it's a few minutes of getting to know you, and then you dive into the more formal and traditional interview questions. I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to clarify with me or repeat yourself in the chat. Awesome. Any other questions? Well, if y'all think of questions, there's no pressure right now. That's why we say, make an appointment with your program manager, or you can follow up with us even on social media. If you don't necessarily want to meet with someone one-on-one yet, if you get on social media, we even have a short video series called Your Career Development Minute that I host on Instagram, IGTV to be specific. And I would say about a month or two ago, I tackled this same subject. Obviously, today I really went in depth. But if you wanted to even check that out or a similar posting and wanted to comment a question, we are checking social media constantly, especially leading up to Expo, to answer any questions you may have. So if you think of something later on, that'll be a good way to ask that multiple eyes can see it and potentially respond to it. But I think one of the best things you can do is sign up for the practice interview day or set up a mock interview. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. Please let us know if we can do anything for you, whether it's to do with interviewing or not. And we hope to see you at the Expo virtually.